live.
All right. Hey, out there. Welcome to another episode of Don't Talk Politics. I guess I could say Don't Talk Politics. Uh, I'm Brother Tahuti, and my co-host here is Brother Subiata, and we're about to just
Okay.
discuss a topic. And our topic is
You can hear him, right?
political prostitution versus real representation. And I know a lot of people probably, as soon as they hear the word prostitution, they're thinking of sex acts or something of that nature, and we're not talking about that. We're talking about um, the degrading of Kamala Harris and all of the things that they're saying. Joe and the whole, I think, was shirts and slogans that they put on. We had a photographer from the Houston Rockets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, all that's been publicized, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about political prostitution in terms of what happens to our representatives who are so strong in our community, who are advocates, who fight, and then get into political positions, and then all of a sudden,
Right.
all of that fire is gone. All of that commitment and dedication, it disappears. So we're just trying to figure that part out. So that's going to be our topic. And Sunyata, you could just go ahead and get us started concerning,
Okay.
history of that.
Yeah, we're gonna take it back to we're gonna we're gonna take it back to the 1972. I think when we had the convention, Black Power convention in Gary, Indiana, and we feel that's where there was a fork in the road because all that momentum coming out of the 50s and 60s, all of that resentment and all that anger represented a moment in time when we had all our so-called leaders, political and religious leaders in Gary, Indiana, to discuss a Black agenda. And then at that moment, that's when we made a decision to go into the political parties. And they were fighting it then. We mentioned last time that one of the things that Bill Clinton touched upon when he said that we almost lost the John Lewis trial. And we almost lost him to the Black Power.
Right, to he said Stokely Carmichael.
Yes,
he said Kwame Ture.
Kwame Ture. So we almost lost. And what was he talking about? And so what he was saying was that at that moment you had Black people who saw. Well, let's go back. Who saw America for what it was and said, you know what? We really don't want to integrate and be part of this. We need to actually tear this down and change it. We need to change it because if we become part of it, it's just going to consume us, and we'll be part of a system that is exploitative around the world and inside the United States. So at that moment, he took SNCC and made it a Black organization. He took SNCC and concentrated on the Black issues, whereas the John Lewis, who was more of the reformist, like, I want to get inside of this and we can work with all people in it. He was at that moment was checked. But then later, like he said, America played its tricks. And 1972 was a key moment of when this society was opened up by the sacrifices of our young Black people in the street. It was opened up, and we had political leaders who decided that they were going to be a part of the Democratic Party.
That's interesting. And that's interesting because 72, you think about us, when we say Gary, Indiana, we think of the Jackson 5.
Exactly.
They had just, basically it probably was on their second album, third album maybe by then.
Yeah.
And it was a whole lot of Black solidarity. At that same convention, is when they were chanting the slogan, it's nation time.
Exactly. That's very critical. So when they talk about nation time, they said, we have issues here that America's going to have to address. And if it doesn't, we're going to hold it by its throat. And the international community, which we never really give due credit, was looking at America at that time. So the international community saw that, wait a minute, you guys are being hypocritical the way you're treating Black people. So America needed a representation inside its political apparatus to show the rest of the world that it wasn't. At that time, you had the Blackness, you had the Black Panthers who were fighting in the streets and literally being killed at 19, 20, and 17, 18 years old, fighting the establishment because of the same issues we have today, police brutality. And so these leaders had the weight of the Black community's expectations on their shoulders, and they had to make a decision. Should we stay as a so-called separate party and pressure on the outside, both parties, or should we give our support to the Democrats who at that time were already fighting the Republicans because Barry Goldwater had brought deep racism into the political mix, and white people reacting to the integration and all the so-called black gains were rushing quickly to the Republican Party. The Democrats needed a new support base, and we could have withheld our vote and strangled them and brought black power and consciousness to it, but we didn't. We came into the system.
Right.
Coming into the system, that's when a lot of our leaders saw personal gain more than collective gain.
And that's interesting because as they made that transition in '72 or so, there was a lot of change in political landscape. If you recall, that was Nixon second term, and they were implementing that strategy, and so the Southern strategy,
Yes.
targeting those racists, targeting those that had those type of quote unquote conservative mindsets.
Right.
And we were in unity in opposition of that, but we didn't recognize the dangers of the liberal
Co-opting.
exactly co-opting, controlling, and just basically using us. I call it political rape.
Right.
Because we get nothing from it.
Right.
Except used.
Right.
And when you look at the topic of political prostitution, we're saying what did we do as those leaders? What happened in terms of changing our course of action and the role that money plays in it? A. Philip Randolph said that you get your ideas from where you get your funding. So when we look at these two monster parties, as they call them, political parties, but these are where do they get their power? They get their power from coalescing and congregating, and then bringing money together to exclude the independents, exclude those quote unquote mavericks or free thinkers from the political process. If you look at what it takes to get on a ballot, you know the stakes are totally different for the Republican and the Democratic Party than for an independent or someone else to gain access to a ballot.
Right.
It's totally different.
Right.
And financing, you have to look at that. Political action committees, we have to understand that. We got to understand campaign finance law and how are all of these politicians, becoming rich?
Right.
How do they get rich?
Exactly.
Yes,
exactly. And so what happens is that within the apparatus, the elite who actually give money to both sides, and we do not listen well enough. When Trump was running, he said, "I gave money to all of you all." He said, "I gave money to Democrats and Republicans." So if he was a staunch Republican, or if he was staunch and truly convicted to his ideas, why was he giving money to everybody? Because at the elite level, it's come in and play this game. If you come in and play this game, we're gonna keep the public preoccupied by cheering for red or blue, when in actuality the agenda is still going to be pushed along. And so what you saw is as we came into the political apparatus, everyone saw there's money to be gotten. Even if you lose, you still can make money by running. If you could put a family member, a friend on a campaign, and they'll get $100,000, $200,000. You can start raising money and hide it because of political rules and regulations. You can actually become wealthy just by being a politician. As a matter of fact, there was an article about Charles Rangel, the last year of his reign in New York. He was still running, even though he wasn't running anymore. He was still collecting money because he said his own political committee owed him $100,000. So he still had his fundraising going up, even though he was no longer going to run.
Saying that he went in debt and they had to pay him back.
Right. But his interest all along was not like Adam Clayton Powell.
Right.
It was a black power.
Him.
Yeah, it preceded him. The interest of he and others became, how can I personally gain from this? Now we look at Obama, which is a soft and a sensitive spot for our people. We have to be truthful. We all love him. We all like how his wife looked, how the family looked. They're nice. But when you're coming upon $1 billion, we have to ask, What did you do to produce a $1 billion network? You have a $1 billion network, and you haven't even walked the streets of Chicago where you came from that is in duress right now. And you're a symbol of love and hope and everything else. And you have a $1 billion, you're encroaching upon $1 billion worth of network. So that's what we're talking about.
And we're asking, is that prostitution?
Mm.
I mean, let's call it out. Is it prostitution? You come in one way, you go out, everybody coming out millionaires and billionaires in that case.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, how did that happen?
Exactly.
Where did the money come from?
Exactly.
And you have to follow the money. So let's look at some of the money. Let's look at these political action committees who are exempt. And let's look at the fact that, like the FEC, the Federal Election Committee or Commission, was defunded basically now by Trump, and is being held under by McConnell, where it's not even functioning.
Right.
You know, so what we getting feedback. What we're dealing with is the agency that's responsible for examining fraud, that examines election irregularities and finance, has been defunded.
Right.
And
not that they were doing their job in the first place, but then you defund them, so they don't have enough manpower
to even investigate, to even look at it.
And then there's a silence on both parties, because both parties have a hand in the corruption. You know, so you hear people say, it's money in politics, money in politics. Yeah, but they don't tell you that they're still taking advantage of those little side deals. You know? So let's go back to when we were looking at the 70s. And like you said, so what should we have done looking back, since they say hindsight's 2020. So let's look back and see what did we have. As a matter of fact, Jesse Jackson, believe it or not, had a great concept during the 1972 hearing. He said, look, now let's stay on the outside and make sure that we get the education that we want. Let's stay on the outside and get these political prisoners released from prison. Let's stay on the outside and check on this imperial policies around the world and what they're doing to these other non-white countries. Let's stay on the outside and make sure that workers get adequate pay. They were demanding adequate pay back then. And these are issues that are still on the table now. So from 72 to now, we failed to make proper inroads in terms of success in those areas that they're still on us to this day. And it's sad. We look at our education system, we look at our employment situation, we look at our healthcare situation, we look at what Ronald Reagan ended up doing by gutting it. And these policies were in effect regardless of who was in power, Republicans and Democrats. As a matter of fact, we look closely, we see that they were working closely with each other.
Always have.
We can look at the Bush. We can look at Bush bringing drugs into the country, but he couldn't have done it without Bill Clinton.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because no one talks about with those drugs coming in the country. Nobody ever traces whatever happened to Oliver North.
Exactly.
Okay, he went as a national spokesman for the NRA, the rifle, Rifle Association. Right. But no prosecution. No. You know, he never did anything, and admittedly was dealing with the Contra rebels and the drug smuggling and then the crack epidemic in our communities, all in the 80s, where they were bringing them in and weapons and everything else. So somewhere along the line, we have people that will talk about it, but when it comes down to the action part, they're compromised because of that finance.
Well, so it's a good point that you brought up. So while he was doing that, at the same exact time, you had Jesse Jackson, who was calling himself the Rockefeller Democrat, and they were pushing for tougher laws against Black people. At the same time, they worked hand in hand. The reason why no one really checked them is because on the flip side, as they bring those drugs and those guns in, the flip side, the Democrats were pushing for stronger sentencing and investing in the prison industrial system, waiting for the outcome as our poor children were being set up for the slaughter. They took away the school, put them in, tracked them into remedial classes, lower their self-esteem, have them drop out of school, find their drugs, create animosity to another. As they massacred one, put them into a prison system that you could then lease out to corporate America at a cheap rate, and it became a vicious cycle.
Slave wages.
Both parties took a part in it, and we had no independent voice to point the finger at it, which we would have had in 1972 if we created it separate. Black Party agenda.
Right, and the monies that were made, the tremendous monies that were made, the prison industrial complex, with people ask why did the numbers went up so high? They were profiting. Right, it's easy. That's part of what we're talking about when we say political prostitution. Right. You have more. Like you said, Jesse Jackson was calling for these tough laws and war, a war against black youth, basically, is what he was calling for. Just like Nixon called for it, and he used the buzzword of war on drugs.
Exactly, law and order.
And law and order, and I'm going to be that. And then Trump just said he's going to be the law and order president and all this other stuff.
That's so the strategy.
The question is, exactly. And the question is, what is law and order? What is the order? So the order is you have the elite at the top and who at the bottom. So see, we got to look at that. We're not talking about individual gains of individual people like a Michael Jordan or Oprah Winfrey or somebody. These are individuals. We're talking collective and collective placement of a people. Basically, we have a racial caste system here in America. Now, nobody can talk about it. Nobody wants to speak about it, but that is what it is. And then the funding behind such a system is we have our representatives serving as overseers to make sure that system stays in place as long as they can gain a little monetary advancement.
Well, that's the
personally.
Well, that's the issue. It's like you're looking at a football team. Let's take, for example, so we look at a team, and the team, let's say the Chargers. We have one coach comes, Coach Democrat comes. Coach Democrat is going to run a certain system, and if he wins or loses, it's going to determine whether or not he gets another 4 years to run that system. And then you have two other coaches going to vie for that spot to run that same team. Now, the situation is that it's still going to be the same team with the same goals. You're just vying to who's going to run that team. And that's what you look at. The elite have an agenda, and they put it out there and say, who is going to run this agenda that's going to make you a personal fortune as long as you don't buck this agenda.
Right.
You know,
so my question is, what is our strategy then to combat that? Because if they say money is power and we don't need them answering to these other people, we need to control with our money, our spending power collectively, to be able to deal with consequences to people who don't run in lockstep with our best interests.
Well,
so
go ahead.
No. So when we're looking at politics, it was Fred Hampton that says politics is war without bloodshed, and war is politics with bloodshed. But in our urban setting, war is waged every day. We talk about Bloods versus Crips or gang problems and this, but then you sit up here and applaud a Democrat versus a Republican, quote unquote, political war, but that war is acceptable because it's played out on TV, it's glorified, but it's cutthroat as far as our community is concerned, because as you said earlier, we bleed from both. We're cut by both. We are oppressed by both, and our economic, educational, social, cultural advancement is suppressed. What would you want to say about?
Well, I was going to say that so we look at the two political parties, and then we see that the agenda underneath. There's a trajectory for the agenda, and we're almost in a situation where we should have to stop and take a look at other groups that aren't negatively affected by the two political parties. And what do that counters it? What they do is they have a strong cultural binding network that binds them together. So regardless of who's running the country, at home and in their communities and in their institutions, they're teaching to their children the same strategies to be successful. And we have vested so much interest in America. We've been proving ourselves since the Civil War. We've been proving ourselves since the American Revolution, bragging about Christmas addicts. So the point is, all this sacrifice that we've done for America, we have other groups that come in and become more successful because they don't give up what we willingly gave up. And back to the 70s, so at the time we were talking Black Power and this, and so really right now you talk to the average black child, now you speak of black power, they say, well, you sound racist.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the same time they were giving us a political game over here, they were giving us a social game and an educational game to brainwash our children into thinking that if you think of race first, it's negative. And then, as we said before, Martin Luther King's last speech spoke about racial identity and using that to push ourselves forward. The dominant society was able to take his image and present it to us as being colorblind and non-racial. And that is not true. You can go back to April 3rd.
That's right. And the question is, who benefits from us not having a race-first philosophy?
Right.
Who benefits from that? If our collective gathering or oppression or slavery or whatever else you want to call our collective gathering in this country was based on race. They passed laws in go to Virginia's laws in the early 1600s, 1625, 1640. The laws were passed to establish slavery based on race. If before it was just servitude, indentured servant, and all of the rest, but they made it specifically for race in prior to America becoming America. So anybody that want to go with the foundation of this country, I'm not talking about anywhere else. I'm talking about this country. You cannot avoid that. Not only is the fabric racist, the foundation was racist. The Continental Convention founders were racist. All of these people benefited on a race-first philosophy. It just wasn't our race; it was the white race, and that's evident in the decimation of Native America. Is evidence in our incarceration and enslavement. Is manifested in the treatment of the Chinese who came over to work on the railroads. It manifested against the Mexicans, here, at least in California where we are, the Zoot Suit riots and everything else. This is manifested throughout. And there's no denying that the disagreeable factor has been the race of the people, and the disagreeor have been those descendants of those founders. There's no arguing that. But our point, again, is we have to stop making apologies and stop accepting our own people who will, quote unquote, sell us out for the highest bidder. And regardless if you had an effective stay in politics, that is not a measuring stick for service to your community, not our community. They will keep you in place to make sure that a progressive politician, if you want to call it, or a progressive leader, I would say, does not come from the midst of the community, because with that, you have demands that are going to be made that the elite and the power simply do not even want brought up, let alone address or let alone adhere to.
Yeah, I think, and also what they do at the same time they're doing that, same time in this situation, they're hypnotizing us with popular people. It's almost like a reality show. More and more politicians are becoming more reality show. So therefore, you get someone like Bill Clinton, who's detrimental to black people worldwide. But yeah, because they projected him as a likable character, as though he's a Charlie Brown, as though he's a Playboy president, because they project him to the people, and they put it on daytime or nighttime television shows, playing a trumpet or a horn or whatever he's playing, a saxophone, and playing black music. Then all of a sudden we like him for popular reasons, but actually his politics were deadly in terms of their outcome to black people.
Absolutely.
And so they've learned that we can give you a politician that you'll like while still passing an agenda to you. All he's done, he's been president, is apologize for his actions in office. He's apologized for the genocide that he helped create in Africa. He's apologized. Not I didn't say this. He said this. He said he was responsible for the genocide in Rwanda. And then he came out and apologized for the
prison industrial system, because he did the same thing as the presidents did before him. Are you following the pattern? That is a pattern of agendas that are being targeted toward us as a race.
It doesn't matter the party.
Yep, and they get us to not think about race. So then we feel, when we're trying to talk to our people about race, they feel guilty, like, oh no, see, there you go again with that black stuff. Black folk would do you wrong just as quick as white folk. We have all these little buzzwords and saying to get us off our square when you see other groups come in and remain in their ethnicity and they do well. So, this is what we're talking about.
And then when you talk about the party, this, the party, that, this political party, that political party, where they both having a party.
Exactly.
And the party's being paid for by us and our ancestors. So we have to look at this and say, hey, this is not something that
can go on. It's sustainable. It's
not. Right. It's not
sustainable.
Something. It can't. It can't sustain, because what we have to do though is start at least awakening to the realities of power and how power works. You can only hurt them in a certain fashion. One is economics, because of the greed. And they will self-destruct over economics. By the way, what's his name? Steve Bannon was arrested. That's he was the Trump what was that, Tea Party and all of that.
He represented his racist faction.
We were talking about political prostitution. So here's the issue. This is a right prostitute. Okay. So he's over there soliciting contributions to build a wall. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, a wall to keep us in.
To keep us exactly. And so here he goes, and so he's arrested for that. But then you have people on the left, like come into our communities, get paid to mail out, as a mailing political strategy, and they get themselves or their relatives exorbitant salaries, like millions of dollars in 2 years or 3 years just to mail some flyers out. And it's ridiculous. You look at some of their travel logs and expenses, the restaurants that they're going to, 19,000, spending 19,000, 20,000 one night on a restaurant. All of these things are
in the public record,
paid for, and they're in the public record.
And they don't hide it.
Charter, jets, all of that stuff.
And that's why they say your ancestors died for you to vote. The reason why they keep saying that, because they're getting rich by having you participate in this scam, in this system, because they're getting rich and they have the nerve to say your ancestors, which to tell you the truth is not true. Ancestors did not die for us to vote. They died for us to be free. And we figured that we had more people in the South, so if we voted, we can control those areas. Because at the same time, once again, Snick said, look, you get the vote, but it's not necessarily going to make us free, because we look up north in Chicago, we have the vote. We're still in slums and tenements, and we still struggle. Yeah, we're still struggling with the same issues. So you're absolutely right. You have this corruption, and it's public knowledge. It's all there. You can go and look and see how much money people are making just by running, how much money the media makes just by people running. It's millions and billions of dollars coming down from the elite who control the media. They control what you see. They control what you hear. That's why if you listen to, say, I don't care any popular radio station, they're gonna tell you get out and vote, but they really won't tell you the issues. And if they won't really tell you what people do, they're gonna get in a popularity contest. They're gonna say who's cute and who's not, who looks nice and who does it, who sings and who doesn't. So this is what they do. They distract you with reality show type issues and not the real issues. And then we find our children. And the sad part about it is, after doing all of that, seeing our community victimized, then we turn around and we blame the victim. We turn around, we say, it's kind of good gentrification is coming because finally the community is going to look nice. Well, why did the community suffer to begin with? Why were the banks withholding loans to begin with?
I had a discussion earlier with a friend of mine, and was talking about the coming to the realization that she had fallen into the habits of not being in her community, not being, comfortable in her community.
Right.
And it hit her. She said, how did I get to this point where I'm nervous around my own people all of a sudden? I've never been this way.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. That's a great point. I mean, you just look at any young child come to you and say, "What's up, brother or sister?" And look at the look. Well, now because of the youth are being more politicized, it's not the same. But before you would say, "Look, brothers and sisters, how you doing?" They would look at you with suspicion,
Right.
like what
you gonna do to me?
Yeah, what you gonna do? And I don't know you like that. I don't know you like that.
You.
All that is part of the conditioning and the socialization. It wasn't like that in the 60s and 70s.
Oh man, we always relied on each other, and see that's what's missing.
That's what's missing.
That's what's missing, and it's purposeful. And when you talked earlier, we were talking about the emotions rather than the intellect or the logic behind something. When we're emotional, they keep us in these reality shows and things to react emotionally.
Exactly.
And for us, we have to do that, because if we don't react emotionally, we stay cool and calm. They don't know what we're thinking. We could be 2 seconds off of them from snapping a neck, and they would never know it without us, having all of these external expressions of emotion.
Right.
So if we're skillful in our demands without having to seek all the attention, but to be effective, we have to take ground. This is land.
Right.
In any contest or war or ground, you have to take ground, and we've given up all the ground we can. So we have to start taking ground. We have to start taking control of our communities, of our education of our children.
Well, hindsight's 2020. Let's go back and look at Crenshaw High School when it was first established, and it was a model school. It had great teachers, great athletic programs. Matter of fact, there was a book written about the last great black baseball team represented by Darryl Strawberry when they played Darryl Strawberry and John Elway for the city championship. And Crenshaw was a model school. And what happened was, because we didn't control the decision making, and other people did, then they dumped troubled children in the school, and they took good teachers and sent them out of the school. And so, so therefore you look at how did they ruin Crenshaw? And remember, it's set at the bottom of a hill of the most wealthiest black community in the United States. And so we have to look at, and by the way, we want to take some calls. Let's see who we have up here. We got any calls coming up right now? So
the number is 424-390-6993. Any callers? And also, if you're looking at us on YouTube, please don't forget to click on the subscribe button for We Are LA. We Are LA. Let's see.
And I mentioned Crenshaw until we get a caller. I mentioned Crenshaw because it shows how we not controlling our community end up ruining our educational system within one of the strongest parts of the nation, not just LA, but the nation. So we have a caller coming, or a caller that's 630. So therefore, if you look at how we did not control Crenshaw, what happened was you took a school. I'm going to put it this way. When I went to school back east, I was back east in Washington, D.C., and I had people come up to me and say, "Where is Crenshaw High School?" I said, "How y'all know about Crenshaw High School?" I said, "Man, a dude named John Williams came out here and beat our best team, and spread the name of Crenshaw." And when I came back to LA, you noticed that the pride in the school was not where it should have been. This was a nationwide known school. You know how many high schools there are in the United States? This is a school that no matter where you went in the country, people knew Crenshaw High School. And because we did not control that immediate area,
Coach Willie Weston,
Willie Weston, look, and the baseball teams, and the track teams,
all of them was tough. I mean, I went up against them, so I know it firsthand. When John Williams walked on the court, I was like, "That's your center." They said, "No, that's the point guard."
That's the point guard. I said, and they were historic. They were world champions at one level. They were world champions, and not just Crenshaw. You look at our other schools. You look at the great artists that came out of Locke High School, the great baseball team that are like. You look at Jefferson and the greatness that came out. Yeah, when it's all black. You look at all the athletes that came out just around Los Angeles, Fremont, and because we did not control them, then you go by them. You say, "Well, what's wrong with these kids?" What's wrong with these kids is the fact that the adults did not control the environments in which those children were growing up in. They allowed them to destroy that environment. Then we turn around once again and blame the victim, when really we have a strong history.
Well, let's look at this.
We can't.
Let's read one of these comments.
All right.
We had a comment here that said, "This is a touchy subject, and I don't want to come off wrong. With all the successful black folks who are part of American history, culture, it is evidence that there's more to it than skin color." Well, let's talk about that.
Well,
let's talk about that. Hold on.
What does he mean by that? I'm not following that.
They're saying these examples.
Mhm.
That's basically what we hear all the time. Well,
Mhm.
here you have the. What about Michael? What about Oprah?
Mhm.
What about Bill Cosby? What about they're saying these are examples that skin color really didn't hinder them. So what's the excuse for the rest of Black America? Basically, that's what I get from the question.
Oh, okay.
And so what I would say
Mhm.
is that those examples have always been there, even on the plantation. If you go back to slavery, there was one or two that got particular favor from the master. They got better clothes to wear. They got better food to eat. So that the others were held in check by those who got those perks and privileges. These individuals who have made it or made it up or quote unquote pull themselves up by their own bootstraps are not the rule. Right, they are set in those positions in order to give credence to the illusion that it's something other than oppression by race in a system or systematic oppression or suppression of the masses of the people. So they come back to the individual argument. And we're not ever talking an individual argument. We're talking a collective argument. Right. Because the trap is in that set is a net. Now you'll have a few people that can slide through the little hole in the net, but the majority of the fish are caught in that net. So we're talking about the majority of our people. You have a few that will slip through the holes in the net and make it, or be placed outside of it. Yeah. But the majority of people are caught in this net. Yeah. And you can't say the net doesn't exist.
Exactly, because even those people admit to the net existing. Michael Jordan told another player, he said, Clyde Drexler was just as good as me, but he didn't know how to play the game. Right. In other words, he knew it was a game and he knew he can only go so far. That's why he didn't speak out on certain issues. That's why he stayed within his boundaries and not speak out. And if you look at Oprah Winfrey actually had a white handler. And, I'm taking these as an example. And also you have to remember, these people added to society. They made people a lot of money, which is consistent with our history with the European. If we had our rights to the stoplight that goes around the world, we patent that light. And if we could have distributed around the world, we would have in our community Google, our own Bill Gates. But they took that. So you have individuals. There's a proverb that says, if you want to run fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go as a group. Right.
And so we had another question. I'm letting Sundiata look at that as well. Basically, it's like, are we giving too much credit to the
question.
allowance?
Yeah, great question.
Which is a good question.
So we want to talk about.
You got to read the question so everybody else will know.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So the question is, I hear you, but aren't you suggesting that there was some overlord that allowed them to have those success rather than them achieving those on their own merit? Aren't you discounting their work? Right. I want to say no, we're not, because this is what we're arguing, is that you move as institutions and within systems. You can't move as an individual. An individual needs institutions around them to protect them. If not, that individual will be used by that system. In other words, Jordan was a great player, but North Carolina benefited off of him, not North Carolina A&T. If North Carolina A&T would have benefited off of Michael Jordan, then thousands of us would have ate. Because North Carolina benefited off of him, whites were the only ones that ate. And then you can look at, and then you can look at all the inventions that we've created. The society has benefited off of. There's an African Ghanaian who helped with fiber optics. Right. He's the one who cleaned up fiber optics. You wouldn't have the ability to use his phones if it wasn't for African intellect. But he's an individual. Because he's an individual and he does not have the institutions such as the banking institutions, just as the media to push it, and because the court system to back him with his claim, he himself will tell you. He did not make as much money as those who had institutions around him. Absolutely. So we're not saying that Black people aren't brilliant. No, on the contrary. That's why I brought up Crenshaw High School and all the others. We're saying that that we haven't built the proper institutions around ourselves. We haven't closed
to maximize
the benefit of our brilliance. So
for everyone.
We're brilliant people. Don't get me wrong. Tahuti could tell you just a list, and Tahuti and I can go down a list of what we did that will blow your mind. We saved the South with George Washington Carver, who himself worked at Tuskegee. So
was offered a blank check by Henry Ford, because he was the most brilliant person he'd ever met.
Matter of fact, Henry Ford named his manufacturing companies plants. That's why you call them operation plants, because in honor of him. But we weren't able to take the invention of even the plastic that he came up with and have it benefit all of us, because we did not have the institutions. That's what we mean by being politically weak.
But not only that, we don't have the knowledge that he was the inventor of all of these things to raise the race esteem and thus the self-esteem of our children. Mm-hmm. See, we don't even know the accomplishments of what we've actually done, mm-hmm. because automatically, because of the propaganda, mm-hmm. it's always assumed that other people produced it, mm-hmm. right? Because mm-hmm. immediately we don't have the institutions that he spoke of in support of our production and our intellect and mm-hmm. Development in place. Right. So if you look at it, just to bring an analogy to what we're talking about, as a child is born mm-hmm. into the world, they're not born without a family structure. They're not born into the world able to sustain life even. Mm-hmm. Immediately, a child is born into a family structure that nurtures, supports, mm-hmm. Provides safety, shelter, food, mm-hmm. and protection. That is the institutions that we're speaking of. Right. And the individual is just like the child. Mm-hmm. The child has all the potential in the world. Mm-hmm. All the potential and ability to grow mm-hmm. and develop. Mm-hmm. But without the institution, the child dies. Mm-hmm. Without the family structure, the child dies. Without the institutions, mm-hmm. the people die. Right. And so we have to stop and understand that our talents mm-hmm. are natural. Yeah. We're naturally a brilliant, talented, mm-hmm. beautiful people. Mm-hmm. However, we have to develop the institutions mm-hmm. to protect, to sustain, mm-hmm. to grow, mm-hmm. and to develop. Mm-hmm. And right now it's a dangerous time because we have the ability mm-hmm. to do this. The world is waking up to the need for us to do it. Right. And
we have a viewer who has a great point.
Due to political prostitution, mm-hmm. we are in danger of going right back to the same place that has been detrimental. It's just like drinking cyanide.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. Kamara White said, honestly, we are growing up in a very racist society, and that's the point. And it's not a society that we have to be afraid of, but we have to create our own mechanism of defense to check that, because we Tahuti's in the school system. I'm in education. When you see our children come up into this education system and we leave them by themselves to deal with that education system, do you know that when they came up with busing, they also came up with what they call tracking. In other words, they took a black child, irregardless of their intelligence, and put them in classes that made sure they only learned the minimum. You can have a lab class, or you can have a book, a physical science book, and the society says those two are the same. So black children get the book, white children get the lab. And these counselors repeatedly, up to this day, you can go to school districts such as Palms. Go, if you don't believe me, go check out any high school and go look at the magnet program. Go look at the science classes, and you'll see white and Asian children in those classes. And trust me, I had my son, they were trying to put him in regular math, and I had to go up there and fight them. Even after I fought them, they still wanted to put him in regular math. So it's not a matter of these parents not doing what they're supposed to be doing. No, when you have a system, then the parents don't have to worry that system is hostile. And we gave that up at Brown versus Board of Education. We gave that up with the philosophy that we have to be with them to be educated. And now it's illegal for black people to have an all black setting. That's seen as being racist. See how they flip the script? Right, meanwhile, you can go to all white schools, all Asian schools, but if you say all black setting with just black teachers, Brown versus Board of Education actually said you have to have a ratio of white teachers, more white teachers than black teachers. That's why you can go to inner city.
That's why they put us out of business.
That's why they put us out of business. So we're talking about our thinking going forward. Mm-hmm. As black people, and I think we're getting there. I love this new generation.
I know we are,
and because not Black Lives Matter, it's Black Power Matters. Black Power matters. If you have Black Power, you ain't got to beg for Black lives.
BPM.
You don't have to beg for anybody to stop killing you. If you have mechanisms in place that if somebody harms you, you can turn around and harm them. Then you have to And then a police officer, a black police officer, won't have to worry to look over his shoulder if whites are going to get him or whites going to put him in jail or shoot him accidentally. Because this is what we're talking about. If you look at the problems that Compton's having right now with a racist sheriff department, they have gangs in the racist sheriff department that are targeting black people. And so you're starting to see that institutions is what's happening.
Or the officer that just they're putting in her papers now to overturn the decision. The one that shot both of them.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Jean,
right.
That's the name.
Yeah.
Jean both.
Jean Bolton. Mm-hmm. Yeah. She's relying on the system.
They working on the system. They know that system is going to produce.
She's falling back on the system, and the system saying, "Don't worry,
the institution is going to support her."
Exactly.
And see, that's what we're speaking of when we're talking about what we need to do in our community. It's just like locally, we're going to have this. Now look at here. We're in Inglewood. Inglewood is having a bond measure asking for $240 million.
Wow.
To upgrade school facilities after having asked for $131 million in 98.
Wow.
And $90 more million in 2012.
Wow.
Plus receiving over $100 million, I believe, in state matching funds.
Wow.
So you're talking
Where'd
about
that money go?
all over. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking $500 million for 17 schools.
Wow.
And nobody understands why we need to be accountable. We cannot allow people to continue to come in and steal. I don't care if it's a black person stealing, a brown person stealing, yellow. Right. You steal from our children.
Right.
So we can't allow that to happen.
No, we can't.
So we need to be aware when we say political prostitution. You can't have people signing off on these things and not having accountability because it's injuring future generations.
Exactly.
And to stop this, we have to be man and woman enough to stand up and say, hey, no more. So these type of issues locally, you should be involved in.
Right.
You need to read these measures.
Right.
You need to not take people's words. See, our problem is that we're so quick. We just want to do a Cliff Notes version of something that's going to impact our community and our lives. Now, how can we call ourselves adults if we're not being responsible? You might as well let your baby vote because you don't know anything about an issue.
Yeah. Oh, I also want to thank Ken for that question. So we welcome diverse opinions, and we discuss it and put it on the table because we have to have hard conversations. Nothing personal. We love each other. We're in this together. And I got to say this too. And I love the fact that the city, the nation burns whenever they harm a black life. There's not a building in this world that's worth more than one black life. We must have that philosophy. And matter of fact, we're going to get a lot of gains simply because our youth went on the street and said, we're not going to take this anymore. It wasn't political process that did that. It's the youth in the streets. So that's the truth. And I don't want us to leave us feeling that we're hopeless, that we can't do this. No, our attention has to be on protecting our institutions. It's institutions that protect you, not individuals. And once again, like I said, there's African proverbs say, you want to run fast, you go by yourself. But if you want to go far, you go in a group. Now, going far in a group means you're going to go slower, but it's going to be more sustainable. And you're not going to be one person that gets out in front of. Now look at Oprah. Oprah came out and put up ads for that sister,
for Breonna Taylor,
and then her network, her base is trying to turn against her. They're trying to threaten her livelihood. You look at somebody, well, he's controversial, but you look at somebody as wealthy as Bill Cosby. I know that's controversial, but the whole point is though that here's a billionaire who was taken down by 12 average white citizens. They were able to take him down. So you're in a system that can come at you. Institutions.
And so if it was just about the money, she would have all the power to say, forget that. But she has to adhere. Because the system does that. The system cracks the whip. You want to know what the whip is now, why the term cracker came about? Because they cracked the whip and put you in line and made you do the bidding of master against your own self-interest. So the question now is, how can these people bring this wealth, this notoriety, this power to their knees? Just the institution does that because they know it'll back them up.
Right. And then we always.
So if we don't develop independently, our own institutions independently, self-sustainable independently, we make enough money, but we take that money and we give it to institutions that oppress us. So what if we gave our money to institutions that develop that sustain us, that empower us. I said that is the answer, but we will not do it because of the conditioning and the fact that we've given ourselves to the institutions over. Our education institution is very important in brainwashing your children. That's just like one of my mentors said, is we're sending our children to the intellectual gas chamber. In other words, we're killing their minds by polluting them with glorification and deification of their enemy. That's just frank. And you deify your enemy, then what are you saying about your own? What are you saying about yourself? If you deify your enemy, meaning you asking what's the importance, is very important spiritually. You deify your enemy and you say that evil is the opposite of God, and you deify God as your enemy. What are you saying about yourself?
We're gonna have a whole discussion on that. We have a whole discussion. And I want to say, Ken, as another question, do you all agree that recent vote to overturn the California proposition, which prevented discrimination on the basis of skin color, in my opinion, that's a move backwards, you know? So it was a recent decision in California, to overturn the discrimination on the basis of color. You know, I have to say this though. Every law can be used for you or against you. It's how is it being interpreted. There's a law that's supposed to guarantee low-income housing, people in low-income housing having a right for credit from banks and getting loans to banks. They're actually using that law to gentrify areas in the United States. The same law that's supposed to help us, they actually use it against us. So I have to say that, you know, this is where we get Black Republicans, because Black Republicans like to live in the contradictions. The problem with America, there's contradictions everywhere. So Black Republicans, instead of picking one side or the other, you're supposed to look at all of it and say, no, there's not a law that they can't use. For instance, Kevin Garnett, the great basketball player, played in the South. There was a fight. He walked up on the fight. Well, whites wanting to ruin his career grabbed him and charged him with a lynch law. A lynch law that was supposed to protect Black people. They were going to use it to get Kevin Garnett. Luckily, he got out and he went to Chicago and his career flourished. But this was a law that's supposed to help us, and it actually ended up hurting us.
In high school.
That's what he was in high school. So my position is this. There's more power within our communities, within our homes, than it is in the political structure outside. If we teach our children right, then we won't have to care if UC Berkeley takes our child or doesn't take our child on skin color, because then we'll have our own Black institutions. We'll make Southwest College a 4-year school and not a 2-year school. If we teach our children right, then we can have 30 kids in a classroom all learning algebra and science because they're disciplined to look at a teacher who we can trust. One of the issues that our children are not sitting in classes and listening is because they have teachers who are hostile, and they go to school feeling that the school does not like them.
Attack.
They're under attack.
And there's proven studies on what that does in terms of their ability to advance intellectually, because they're using so much energy defending their humanity and feeling attack. Adrenaline kicks in. It takes at least 20 minutes before they can even calm down
upon that more.
And obtain the knowledge. You have the enzymes, the defense mechanism going off in the brain to the fight or flight instinct coming in before they can even come back to a point where they're able to absorb information. That has to wear off. It's through the body, and it doesn't wear off. A quicker way to wear off is like what we used to do: take the kid out and run around with him for a little while, come in and sit down and do your work, and it'll go away. But they're not going to do that. It's structured against that. You sit down in a mundane environment, and you're dealing with this hostile teacher, and that's just one instance. Now imagine that happening all day. Imagine a little child that gets it every day from this same teacher or whatever teachers that come into. Eventually their esteem is out the window, and learning becomes quote unquote a learning disability when it's actually an attack. And
he's not saying an opinion. It's something he's been in education for 20 years. He sees this, and the facts that and the science that he's noting, it comes from white scientists. It's not Black scientists. I also want to say, when we talk about institutions, there came out a study that says Black babies have a 50% more likelihood to survive if they have a Black doctor. This is white people are saying this. Think about this in the age of COVID and how many Black people are dying, and they're telling it's underlying conditions. But no, this is recently came out. It said that black babies have a 50% chance of survival if they have a black doctor. So that much more better chance to go to college. These are statistics. These aren't no black radical militant. These are white people looking at statistics and saying, okay, it's obvious. We're killing y'all. We're destroying y'all dreams and your hopes.
Right.
You know?
And another thing on from the earlier comment about the law on California and the overturning of the law. Basically, laws are only as good as they're enforceable.
True, yeah.
We had all these race anti-racist laws on the book, but they would never enforce them.
No, nope.
So either way, on a law, it's an ability of how you adhere to it and how it is enforced.
That's right.
They put it on paper, but the only validity that it has is enforceability.
Right.
So let us look at what is in our best interest and go with that. And let the law falls into line with the will.
Mm-hmm.
So if we exhibit the will, you will see that there is a difference between they'll change a law in a heartbeat right in front of you.
Right. Right.
And it won't matter because it's not enforceable.
Right.
Just like now, there's laws on the book about protesting and everything. It didn't stop anything because it's not enforceable. They can't lock everybody in jail.
Right.
So we have to start thinking power.
Mm-hmm.
We're not used to that because we've been conditioned to think as a servant and to think as a polite acceptor of abuse and unequal and unequitable treatment. So when we think in terms of power, it's a different stance that we take.
Yeah.
It's just a different confidence that we have. So we must start looking at laws and everything that they put in front of us as temporary.
That's a very good point. That's an excellent point. Because if you look at right now, when everyone stop and just really check out the environment, see how these black babies in the street have changed the discussion around the country. Racist ass NASCAR has said we're gonna take down the Confederate flag.
Stars and bars.
And racist ass NFL is saying we're gonna sing "Lift Every Voice and Sing." The reason why they're doing that is because they live in a global community, and the global society is looking at them and saying, "You want to sell merchandise in this non-white country?
We're not doing business.
We're not going to do business with you.
We're not doing it.
We're not going to do business with you until you change your habits." And all of a sudden they change, and it took black kids in the street. It didn't take black politicians in the
They weren't able to deliver that.
They weren't able to deliver
because
that.
of political prostitution.
Yeah.
See, those children, they're not vested in all of that.
No.
They are free thinkers and free actors.
Yes.
A politician's gonna say, wait a minute.
Yeah.
This might cost me my house.
Yeah.
This might cost me the next 5 years.
Yes.
This might cost me my ascension
Yes.
in the political thing. What is more important?
Right.
See, we got to stop these people from putting individual goals ahead of group goals and community goals. Your individual goals can align with the group goal and the community goal and the nation goal, but it doesn't have to conflict unless you have some selfish or self-serving aspect to your personality that's going to continue to be detrimental to the group as a whole. We have to stop tolerating that.
Right. Now, see, and one of the important things we look at history, we look at a Black Wall Street. Why was Black Wall Street so important? Why was pre-integration so important? Because black teachers were free to speak their mind. Black Wall Street was free to behave as they wanted to because they did not have an overseer or boss that could check them. Now, that's why they had to eventually come with the bomb and drop it on them, because they also had guns too. Black Wall Street, which they call Little Africa, by the way, they called it Little Africa. They had the African blood brotherhood that protected them with guns, but they were a free society. So this is what we're saying, that when we set up our institutions and we set up our businesses and we can rely upon one another, because the saddest part about a black child won't hear the truth because he's going to come across very few black adults that will be able to tell the truth without worrying about the consequences.
Right.
So a black child, every adult that comes before him is looking over his shoulder. I'm gonna tell a story real briefly. My child has an African name, and when they were born, and then listen to this. Please listen. I'm gonna go very slowly so you can hear and listen how deep this is. So I named my child an African name, and I had a black friend who came up and said, "Aren't you gonna be worried about them getting a job one day?" Now, at the point, I'm the most proudest in my life. I'm thinking about the lineage. I'm thinking about what her children are going to call her, what her friends are going to call her. This is my child. At that point, I have to think consciously of the master. John Henry Clark said, slaves and dogs are named by their master. So let's not pretend, let's not play games. We are always thinking about what is the white man going to do, or what does he think if we do X, Y, or Z.
Thank you. And that very important point, instead of embracing the ancestral name with the power and the independence that reflects, immediately, because of our psychological conditioning, we run back to fear, because it's a fear base. What is the consequence for being who God created you to be? For exercising self-determination, or Kujijagalia, for being the authority over your own life. There's a consequence to that. And we're not transferring that to our children. We're not demonstrating that. We're demonstrating compromise. And people say that means to get along. It does not mean to get along, because the person that created the strife is disagreeable to everyone all over the planet. And yet, we are teaching our children to survive, but not to live. There's a difference. We were taught to survive. We had to survive. We were eating guts. We were doing anything to just make it to the next day. But this is another day. And so if we're not teaching our independence, we're not teaching that politics has to serve your interests. We're not teaching that the education has to serve you. Uneducated people solve their own problems. We're not teaching that. We're teaching, as he said, what's going to happen when you have to go get a job. We say job stands for jacking our blackness. We have to teach independence. Create your wealth. Create wealth creation. If money that everybody likes to talk about is the symbol of power, why do we just spend ours and give it away? Why do we not produce more wealth with industries? Because we have been systematically taking apart. Our institutions teach subservience. And until we stop that, we are going to continue to transfer not generational wealth, generational struggle. And that's what we have been doing. And it's time for that to stop. Stop feeling, I call it the savior mantle or honor. You can't just feel good because you're suffering because you read about that in scriptures. You're not supposed to be suffering. We're supposed to be advancing, and we can't advance out of fear. So eliminate the fear and we will progress.
And I think that's part of what we're talking about with our politicians, with the prostitution, in terms of the so that's the whip. The whip is that we feel what they're going to do to us. The flip side is the carrot. The carrot is the carrot is what they're going to do for us. So if you have that fear that they can harm you, you also have appreciation that they can do something for you. And so our politicians step into the political realm not to sacrifice for the group, but they step into the political realm because the closer they get to what they perceive as power, the more they feel that power is going to do something for us, which leads us to Kamala Harris and her behavior as Attorney General, and how she went after innocent black youth, but yet protected white guilty people such as Steve Munition, who worked at the bank and was undercutting
who's with Trump right now.
Who's with Trump right now. She shielded him from prosecution, and she cynically put black boys into prison. Why? Because the whip to her was, if I go after this white boy, I'd get hurt. The carrot for her is, if I go after this black boy, I will be advanced.
Rewarded.
I will be rewarded. And Obama had the same politics. We're gonna have to talk about Obama because I know we love him. We love his family. We love how they look. We got to be truthful about what they
iconic.
do. Because if we're not truthful what they'll do, we'll end up blaming the victim for policies while we cheer those who do screw with us, you know. So,
And I don't care what he looks like.
mhm.
I mean, everybody, America can love him. I don't care what he looks like. I
Right.
care about what he did and didn't do.
Exactly.
And so when we look at of all of this, it's fine. Iconically, it had a value for our children, and I appreciate all of that. But in terms of policies, I'm gonna look at him. He went into Africa and killed leaders in Africa.
Exactly.
They had him do that. He
Yeah.
authorized that.
Right. And he put AFRICOM there, and they just came a report that just came out. There's more black ops now going on in Africa by the United States than ever in the history of the United States. And they couldn't do that before because Bush had pissed off the African countries. They needed a face, a figure, a Trojan horse to get in there. Africa loved Obama. And when he was able to go in there and put those bases all across to now military bases now, so that they can check and get that natural resources. And finally, what we're going to say is that we have to, as a people and as a group, we have to start looking internationally. We have to know this is a global solution. It's a global solution. Why do you think Trump was getting loans from Russia? Well, if he's able to do that, you're able to get loans from Africa, Caribbean, Africa, and all around.
All the countries.
Don't restrict yourself just to the United States. If you're getting your money from somewhere else outside the country, you can do that now with internet and everything else. You can do online businesses that you want to depend upon people inside the United States. There are 1 billion black people or more around the world.
So what we have to do is make sure, and it's the trust relation. All relationships are based on trust. They've taught us to distrust internationally our people. They taught us to distrust domestically our people. So until we can establish trust among ourselves and call into accountability our politicians who are not serving these interests, then we will continue to be played. You know, we're played by both parties. We're played by lip service in terms of politeness, quote unquote, political correctness, but it doesn't mean anything when they have a knife in our backs and are turning that knife every chance they get and trying to gut us from even demonstrating so-called upward mobility. So when we're finishing up now, but we're going to continue next week with our new topic, and we encourage you to encourage your friends to come for a serious conversation, because we're gonna advance the information. Our main goal is to uplift our discussion and on the issues that we won't raise with each other because they're hard issues. But we have to get the mirror going. We have to look. We have to love what we see in the mirror and know that mistakes will be made, but we got to love us enough to make it through those mistakes.
That's right.
Yes, I'm saying I did.
I agree with you. Ashe. We love you all. We're one people.
See you next week. Well, we're gonna come back in 2 weeks. We'll take next week off, but we'll be back in 2 weeks with the next program. But until then, you guys stay strong. Don't talk politics. Talk black to me.
That's right.
All right.